Now, I think it's very fair to say that when you take a very close look at the Acolyte Episode 8 / finale by Leslye Headland, that there is nothing that can save this series, and the usage of cameos like Yoda and Darth Plagueis, for example, just didn't do it for any hardcore fans out there, let alone any casual fans out there. They all see through everything that's going on by Kathleen Kennedy, Leslye Headland. Those two cameos were nothing more than the dangling of the carrot in front of all the fans to really make a desperate attempt to revive the series at the very tail end. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So, Leslye Headland, we know that she has a very big problem with the fans, with the critics, with those that have been, very much critical about the Acolyte, especially, by the way, with Episode 3, which I think goes down as the worst moment in television history. And when you look at everything else as well, related to what the Acolyte really is, it is nothing more than a disgrace to what George Lucas built for 40 plus years with the Star Wars universe. Now, focusing on everything else related to the damage control and the double down mode of Leslye Headland, it only gets worse coming out of the last episode, and thankfully, it is over. I can just say that we can all finally rejoice that the Acolyte is now behind us and we can focus on other things. But looking at Leslye Headland here, she continues to go into damage control mode about her overall view of everything. The backlash, the criticism, her belief in Star Wars, shifting away from George Lucas, you name it. And she gets very much angered with the overall fan base. Now, with the Acolyte finale already creating more backlash from Star Wars fans, one major development now has more to do with showrunner Leslye Headland and what she had to say about the ongoing criticism after Episode 8 debuted on Disney+. She stated the following: "With the last episode, I really think it just proves how so many fans that were engaging in the criticism with the last 7 episodes were all wrong with their view of what the Acolyte really is all about. This is something that I made very clear to everyone and nobody listened to me. The Acolyte is not what you think it is, and you really learn about what I meant there when I said that in Episode 8. I really wanted to take a different approach than George Lucas's vision and what he did with his films. When watching the fake reviews online, I remember just screaming at the fans and just yelling at the responses online for how uninformed they really were with the lore and what the characters are all about. For example, like with Yoda, I see no indication of how our reveal with his place at the Jedi Temple ruins his credibility as a Jedi. There is just so much to learn about him. And the way I saw Yoda in the series is how I saw Luke in The Last Jedi. There really is something I wanted to change with that character. It gets very frustrating seeing how uninformed fans really criticize your work without holding any knowledge of what Star Wars is truly about, and how our support for LGBTQ is some kind of an agenda. Myself, Kathy, and Dave have been trying to make this clear, that this is coming from no agenda at all. Star Wars belongs to everybody and everyone. It was my priority over everything else to really make that relevant in the background, whether it's for the characters or for the actors that brought in these fantastic roles and performances. It gets very tiresome seeing this new era of fans using the concept of review bombing to get their point across, and I remember conversing with Kathy about this, and we both agreed that it is an obvious thing that is very disjointed for the toxic side of the fan base that holds this desperation to keep Lucas's vision intact. Star Wars is about evolution. It's not about catering to one creator's vision. And we wanted to move on from one creator's view of the franchise to really build new fans for a new era. Now guys, before I move on about what Leslye Headland is just throwing out there again and saying the most nonsense things in the world about Star Wars, it just goes to show you how crazy she really is. The fact that she admits that at times she found herself screaming at the reviews online, yelling at the fans about how quote-unquote uninformed they really are, and how their critics or their way of criticizing the Acolyte is basically their way of throwing in their narrative. It was never about us throwing in a narrative. It was never about us, kind of throwing in our overall view of what Star Wars needs to be, but rather it's about our view of protecting George Lucas's vision and showing how passionate fans really are about Star Wars. Now look, I think that the repair for Star Wars is pretty much non-existent. It is beyond repair at this point. I don't see it really going back to the way it was pre-Disney Star Wars, pre-Kathleen Kennedy. I don't think it's ever going to come to that point where it was truly something very special, to where you could really look at it as something just untouched. Now you look at Star Wars and it's really like a game of hit or miss. You know, it's either failure or something that's very much mid, and that's really where you're gonna get. So, interestingly enough, she continues, and I think everyone needs to accept that. I just think studios and real critics need to wake up about fan reactions online and across social media as something that cannot be trusted at all, and a type of behavior that is a strategy to only promote their narrative to what they want to see in Star Wars. It was my mission to really shift away from that tone and feeling of what Star Wars had for so many decades, to really build something from the ground up. Kathy isn't stopping with her use of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and her support for characters that carry that modern fit for the film industry. So Leslye confirms that Kathleen Kennedy is not stopping with her use of DEI, and at the same exact time she says that this is not about any kind of an agenda, and that if you are catering to one creator's vision, in this case George Lucas, she believes that that is the big problem with a large demographic of Star Wars fans. Now, she likes to call them toxic males or the toxic male demographic. This is something that, by the way, Leslye Headland and Amandla Stenberg have been throwing around out there, that it's all about the toxic male demographic, right? That's creating this negative response, and that all the reviews online are fake. Now, look, I think that episode 8 really proves that nothing can fix this show. Not Darth Plagueis, not Yoda, not even, of course, the insertion of the fact that they really wanted to expand on Darth Plagueis' character. So, nobody cares. Nobody really cares at this point where, you know, Leslye Headland goes. And we already know that there's a lot of problems happening between the Walt Disney Company and Lucasfilm after she lost various Lucasfilm projects, either as a co-writer or as a director. This was, of course, ranging from Acolyte spin-offs to shoehorning characters like Osha and Mae into cameos for other Star Wars projects that fit into that High Republic era. And it's only going to get worse, you know, as time moves on. I think that even with the Mandalorian movie coming out in 2026, I don't even think that's going to reverse the damage that was done to Star Wars. We all have to remember that Dave Filoni fully supports everything in the Acolyte and what it stands for. He openly admitted that he loves what Leslye Headland did, and it's not about keeping his job or anything like that. It's not about keeping his role as, you know, chief creative officer over at Lucasfilm. Yes, that is his position over there. That's what they call it. But nonetheless, we know that looking ahead, everything else, like Skeleton Crew, the Rey Star Wars film, it's all in the making of Kathleen Kennedy. But overall, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.